Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution, and I'm very excited that you can join me today as we start going through the Behaviour Revolution scriptures. That's right, a new version, a new translation, transliteration of the scriptures that Yahusha has given us to start working through and making simple, making his way straight, making the pathway easy for people who are coming along and crying out for deliverance in the 21st century. So remember, we're not watering down the message, not at all, but we want to express this message in a 21st century way so that people can hear it, so that people can understand it and get the gems, the truth, the amazing love out of Yahusha's scriptures. So I hope you were able to see the video I did last week about the introduction and just the essence of why I'm doing this and my reasons, motivations, and what Yahusha's doing in my heart and mind about this subject. If you didn't get to see that, I recommend you watch that first, because we're going to kind of skip through the introduction today. So if you haven't watched that, just click on the link underneath this video and watch that video first. I'm trialing a new thing today where we're going to actually go live and you're going to see the scriptures come up next to me here, and we're going to go through it. We'll start reading it together, and so you can see, because I'm finding out that not just the younger generations but the older generations, people are getting busy and they're getting tired, and the older people are getting older and the younger people are getting less and less interested. They're more into their movies and gaming and online experiences. So for me to actually broadcast this live and make it visual, make the scriptures visual, so people can just push play and they can read along with me, and I think that'll be a lot more user-friendly. Remember, that's what this whole thing is about, making the Hebrew scriptures, which are beautiful and brilliant, user-friendly. We want it to be easy, don't we? So the whole point of this version is we're cutting the corners, answering all the riddles, giving all the answers, making it easy for everybody, because we live in the 21st century, so we have the perspective of the last 6,000 almost years, where we can look back and go, okay, that's what Yahusha meant there, and that Yahusha said that would happen, and that's what that happened there. So I'm just adding it all into the scriptures to make it easy, so you don't have to read it all the way to the end to get the answers. You can get the answers all the way through, okay? So we'll go quickly through the introduction, but really, really fast, okay? So you've got the cover there, the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures, page 1 there. Then we go to the page 2, bringing Yahusha's eternal blood covenant of deliverance to all generations in the 21st century. It's all about a blood covenant, remember? Yahusha's not interested if there's no blood involved. That's just how his mind, his system, his commonwealth, everything in his reign works on the concept of blood. Particularly when Adam and Eve fell, blood needed to be shed. It's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, blood for blood. If you disobey me, your blood has to be shed. On the day that you sin, you will die. So blood was shed from the moment Adam and Eve disobeyed. Blood was shed so that they weren't destroyed. Blood was also shed from the first lambs to clothe them. So we see death and destruction coming the moment they chose to disobey Yahusha. So we also have a scripture down there, one of our most favourite scriptures here at the Behaviour Revolution. Yahusha said, I hope you realise that the down and out, the drug addicts and the whores are becoming my bride before any of you religious vipers. Because I'm not here for those who think they're okay, all right? I'm here for those who know they're not, okay? He's not here for the religious people, the pomp and the ceremony. You saw how they treated him when he walked the earth. They killed him, hated him, trying to catch him out all the time because he was a threat to their man-made institutions, the money and the esteem and the power and position that they had in society. He was a threat to all that because he didn't care about all that. He just came for the lost sheep at the house of Yisrael, and in fact he came for all the lost sheep. So, because Yisrael is not just one tribe, remember? Yisrael was 12 tribes. He had 12 sons, and you're going to learn all about that in this wonderful book called Genesis, Bereshit. So let's go to the next page. You've got a lovely visual there of the difference between the Garden of Eden and what happened after the garden, when the ground was cursed, and the only way mankind could approach Yahuwah was to build an altar. Imagine having to do that today. Sacrifice animals, slit their throats, drain their blood, flesh, carcasses, stink. Imagine all that. Bugs and vultures trying to interrupt you, and imagine the lifestyle of doing that today. Aren't we so blessed? And isn't it amazing that we can have Yahusha inside us and communicate that way? Which brings us to the altar. The only way mankind could approach Yahusha in the beginning, and I said this in the last video, but we all know about the temples and the tabernacles, and how our body is now the temple. Don't you know that your body is now the dwelling place of the living Elohim? All those sort of scriptures. But before there was even a temple, before Moshe took them into the wilderness and the instructions for the first tabernacle were given, mankind, Adam, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, they used to build an altar because they were so overcome with emotion and awe and gratitude, and they wanted to document it, make a monument to represent this, so that they walk past next time and remember that's where Yahusha met me over there, you know. So they built altars out of rocks, whatever they had lying around. They'd scratch things into it, and they named places based on the altar and the experience that they'd had. So that was the concept of the altar that we had there. And remember, I'm just skimming through this introduction. You can go through my last video, which goes into greater detail on all that. This was the forward that talks about what we're on about. Yahusha's talking about speaking to us in these days on babbling lips and with a foreign tongue. That's the whole purpose of this. We speak English today, so we want to make this translation, the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures, English. We don't want Hebrew everywhere because no one understands that. We want it to be easy. We don't want them to have to go through weeks and months and years of training just to get deliverance. We don't want them to have to learn a second language, all right? The Hebrew was great. The people, and I've said this, the people who went back in time, so to speak, back to the Hebrew, those who have been teaching us for 5, 10, 20 years in the Hebrew roots movement have done an amazing job, and we still look up words in the Hebrew if we want to know what they mean. But how do we express it? How do we live it? What's our lifestyle to be? We can't just stay back there, otherwise we have weird, introvert, strange behavior. We start wearing strange things, and we have to live a 21st century reality in our lives, but we have to have the truth of deliverance, Yahusha's Besorah, his good news. We have to keep that in our hearts, guard it, guard his commands, and live it today. Not live it back then, not live how they lived, but live it today. So that's the whole concept of that page. Next page, we went on to the path. That's a really interesting understanding about the path. This whole purpose, the whole reason for doing this is so that we can stay on our path. He who overcomes will get this. He who overcomes will get that. You know, white robes, a white stone, this to that. Access to the new Jerusalem, all these things that the overcomer will get. So we have to overcome. Once we've got the Ruach inside us, after our immersion in water, he comes in us. The Father and the Son, Yahusha himself, comes inside us and starts slowly but surely delivering us. We're legally delivered the moment we go under the water. We come up a new person, but we've still got all our old habits with us. So we have to overcome, read and do. And Yahusha puts us through a Hebrews 12 experience where he disciplines and chastises us, rebukes us and flogs us. So that's the path. You can read that. If you haven't seen it, go through the other video. And this page here tells us why there are parts of the story that we've never read before. I never had. We've used books like Jubilees and Yasha and Enoch. It's another good one, Adam and Korah. We've used that just to add little bits and pieces to the story, to show the influence of unclean spirits and what they were truly doing back then, and to also show us that it's exactly the same today. We're not alone. Satan is just as evil as he was back then as he is today. He's doing the same thing with his people, trying to destroy everything good that Yahusha laid out from the moment of creation. So, these scriptures use the name of Yahusha from beginning to end. I don't use the name Yahuwah in narrative. I start from the beginning. In the beginning, Yahusha, because that's who I know. That's my deliverer. That's who created the heavens and the earth. That's who I'm going to use. That's the name I'm going to use. All right. And I go into more detail on that page there. So then we've got our table of contents there, all the different chapters. And Bereshith. This is our first chapter, guys. In the very beginning. That's what Bereshith means. And the ancient Hebrew symbols, if you look at them, we're not into all that Hyksos picture graphic script or anything like that. That's man-made, that's made up. All that that's stuff that they used to, the picture form, you know, the Hebrew language and the picture form that they go on about, the Hyksos pictograph type script that looks like hieroglyphics. That's not true. That's all man-made. But the actual Hebrew symbols, the Paleo Hebrew symbols, for this word Bereshith, if you look at them in Hebrew form, all those symbols represent a covenant house. There's one that represents a house, there's another symbol that represents fire, another one that represents water. So when you put it all together and you look at these symbols together as a word that says Bereshith, the ancient Hebrew symbols make up the word Bereshith, represent a covenant house. A loving covenant house, forged in a fire of blood and water. All these symbols that are just the building blocks, foundation of what this whole book is going to be about. A covenant house forged in a fire of blood and water. This very special marriage home was created for the loving relationship and protection of Yahusha's treasured first fruit bride on this earth. That was the whole purpose of his creation. He wanted a loving relationship, a family. And it was all surrounded by this huge hedge of protection, guarded the garden by his instructions. And that's why the minute they broke them, they were kicked out. So let's go, brothers and sisters. Are you ready? Bereshith, a covenant house for Yahusha's first fruit family. This, of course, Bereshith was written by Moshe. We'll learn about him later. But let's go into the creation week. Let's go, brothers and sisters. Chapter 1. And the other thing about this version is that there ain't no chapters and there ain't no verses. And so it reads like a lovely story, a letter, a book. So, and that's how it was written in the first place. So there's been some tinkering with the text and tinkering with the format and tinkering over the years, over the centuries, to try and, as Shaitan does, rip down everything good that Yahusha's doing. So, creation week. Here we go. In the very beginning, Yahusha created the entire universe and everything in it, seen and unseen. And Yahusha saw that the earth had become an unshaped emptiness of gloom and doom. So he hovered over its surface like a gentle breeze and said, "Light." And the vibration and frequency of his living word cut through the darkness of the planet, filling it with the radiance of his goodness and esteem. Now, the whole idea of Yahusha having to speak to get things done is very interesting, because we know he's a spirit. We know that when the scripture says things like the incense went into the sweet smelling went into Yahusha's nostrils. Like, what nostrils? He doesn't have nostrils. You know, he's a spirit. It's symbolistic, metaphoric, all those sort of things. It's to make him seem approachable and putting the words into language that we would understand. You know, I will hit Egypt with an outstretched arm. You don't have an arm. You're a spirit. You know, like, so when it says he said things, he didn't need to say it. But this is the way the whole scriptures from beginning to end function. You can't just say Yahusha sat there and thought and this all the time, because it doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? So all through the scriptures from beginning to end, there is a word for it. I forget what it is. Where the scriptures explain Yahusha in a mankind kind of way. You know, like putting attributes on Yahusha that we ourselves have. You know, taste, touch, feel, parts of our body, hands, face, eyes, nostrils, things that Yahusha has. Well, he has them now because he became a man. But in the beginning, he was just a spirit. Yahusha was a spirit. So in the very beginning, Yahusha created the entire universe, and everything in it, seen and unseen. And Yahusha saw that the earth had become an unshaped emptiness of gloom and doom. Did he create it like that? Or did something happen before this account that we don't know and don't need to know about? Was it when Ⅎ was kicked out of the higher dimension? Was there some cataclysmic event that made the earth become a dark form? You know, what happened there? We're not told, we don't specifically need to know. But anyway, at the beginning of this account, Yahusha hovered over the surface of the earth like a gentle breeze, and he said, "Light." And the vibration and frequency of his living word cut through the darkness of this planet. The vibration and frequency of his living word. Did you know that his voice, his power, there's a connection between the audible volume of his voice, his living word, it's actually living. So when he speaks, the vibration, the sound waves of his voice actually have power in itself to create things. You know, if he said cup, he could bring a cup into being, because the vibration, the power of his voice, the power of his living word. He is the living word. He is all cosmic, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipotent. He is the power of the whole universe and beyond. He created the universe. So that's why there's such a big connection between the spiritual and the natural regarding sound, and not just sound, but visual as well. But sound, you know, like music. You know how music can just, no matter what mood we might be in, sound can just, music can reach right into us and just lift us, you know, just by putting a certain song on, or, you know, hearing somebody's voice hit a particular note in a certain way, and our heads just want to explode, you know, like we just feel this drunken intoxication just from a note, and that's just from an earthly person. So can you understand how Yahusha's voice, just by saying light, or some say let there be light, he didn't have to waste words, he didn't have to speak at all, you know, but his word is so powerful that just by saying light, and we're not talking about at the beginning in the first day here, we're not talking about the sun, moon and stars, we're not talking about that. He didn't say light and the sun appeared yet. We're talking about the darkness as in something happened on this earth. It's just without form. It's just, you know, an unshaped emptiness of gloom and doom. And that's not going to sit with him. So he said light. And the goodness, the radiance of his goodness and esteem filled the planet. The vibration and frequency of his living word cut through the darkness of the planet, filling it with the radiance of his goodness and esteem. His esteem is like a thick smoke, like a thick blanket. You know, like later on, we hear about the esteem that fell on top of the temple, like a glowing light, like a fire, or a Shekinah, they used to say. And people could feel it. It's like walking through a haze, you could almost feel it in the air, and yet it was light. It was a power, but you could feel it almost. It was a thickness, and it just lifted you and made you feel like amazing. But it wasn't a chemical substance. It was his, you know, like when Moshe was on the mountain, he came back and his whole face was glowing, his hair was white, and he was just glowing, and the people just couldn't handle it. They said, put something over your face, it's too bright. He'd been in the living presence of the creator of the universe. So that's what this is like. He brought his presence into planet Earth on day one. Got that? We're not talking about the sun, moon and stars yet. This light we're talking about is a spiritual light. And it's really fascinating if you look at, study the idea of his audible voice and just how powerful it was. It strengthens our belief to know that whatever he said, whether audibly to us in our ear to us, or written in his word, whatever he said will never come back void. There's a scripture that says that. When I say something, my word always achieves what it set out to do. I don't rest until it does. So my word will never come back void. So don't worry, if I've said it, it's going to happen. It may not happen in our earthly idea of hurry the hell up, do it. It's in his time. you know, might be 5, 10, 50, 100, 200, 3,000 years, you know, like when but he said, my word will never come back void. And we can see why. His word, just by saying light, cut through all that darkness of whatever had happened that we're not supposed to know about. Whatever happened, you know, I don't believe he makes or creates things that are unshaped, empty, and gloom and doom. I don't, you know, without form or void, they say. Like, he doesn't create things like that. Everything he creates has a purpose. It's beautiful, it's amazing. So something happened that made it like this. So he went and said, light, that's enough, light. And he entered the earth. This planet was filled with his esteem. Old translations say glory, but that's a bit pagan and Christian. We don't like that word. So this difference of light and dark, let's go on. The difference of light and dark within the same day greatly pleased Yahusha. So he called them day and night. This is where day and night come in. Placing the night time first before the daytime on this very first day. So the earth went from being formless and void, an unshaped emptiness of gloom and doom on this first day, to being light, of him setting the scene, stepping onto the stage and saying, here we go, check this out. So on the next day, let's keep going, Yahusha said, separate. And a huge gap formed within the waters, because the whole planet was made up of water, if you can visualize that. This unshaped emptiness was just a liquidous mass. And so he came in and said, separate. So instantly, a huge gap formed within the waters, moving and separating waters from waters. So we've got the waters and then the waters separated like this. So there's a gap in between them. Got that? And this one here went really hard, smashed it together really hard like a protective canopy. And this one was just water still. So a huge gap formed within the waters, moving and separating waters from waters, smashing and compounding the higher waters into a hard protective canopy of atmosphere around the earth. We all know what atmosphere is. The rocket ships have trouble getting out of the atmosphere because it's so thick. They burn up if it's not done properly, or coming back into the atmosphere. But this atmosphere was different. Prior to the flood of Noah, the atmosphere was like a hard protective shell that went all the way around the earth. Rock hard. It was water though. Big like wall, canopy of, imagine that, crystal clear, rock hard water all the way around the earth. So it was like the whole earth was like a greenhouse. You know, all the temperatures stayed a nice, you know, temperate, you know, it was amazing. So hard protective canopy of atmosphere around the earth, and he called the huge space in between this sky. So you've got water, canopy, and in between here you've got sky. All right? There was evening and morning, the second day. So that's what he did on the second day. The next day Yahusha said, dry ground, and the waters under the sky, this was the oceans, the waters under the sky were collected together and dry ground could be seen, which Yahusha called earth, and the collection of the waters he called sea. So not only do we have water now, we've got land as well. Land, oceans, gap, sky, and then canopy, all right? So the next day, same day, then he said vegetation, and instantly there was grass, seeded plants, and fruit trees all over the surface of the earth, and all ordered according to their kind. According to their kind. There's no chaos, no evolution, no big bang madness, nothing like that. Things didn't just randomly form. No, everything had every species, and everything was done according to its kind, you know? That's how Yahusha works. Everything is in order, perfect order and routine. And every plant, every animal, everything that's done has its own species, its own kind. And Yahusha saw that all this was very good. There was evening and morning, the third day. I should also add at this point that the evening comes before the morning. This was the foundational principle behind why, in the Hebrew, and why we today start a day from sunset. As soon as the sun's going down, that's the beginning of a new day. You've got this little twilight grey area where one day's ending and another day's starting. That's pretty much a time to, if it's Shabbat approaching, that's pretty much a time to, come on, hurry up, Shabbat's coming, let's get inside and rest. That's how we worship, that's how we behave, that's how we observe the Shabbat. We rest. Sunset on the 6th day to sunset on the 7th day. So there was evening, then there was morning. This principle is being set up from the very beginning. Evening, then morning. A lot of people say you only rest on the day part. No. It's a 24-hour day, and it starts at sunset. And you can see that here. There was evening, and then there was morning, a day. That's the day. So we're up to we've just completed the 3rd day here. The next day, Yahusha said, light up the sky. And the sun, moon, and stars appeared. The sun to mark the daytime, and the moon to fill up the nighttime. And these lights in the sky are for signs, for festivals or appointed times, Moedim, days, and for years. There's evening, then morning, the 4th day. So these are, they're there for different reasons, okay? We're not worshipping the sun. We don't observe our festivals according to the sun. The sun is there to provide light and warmth and to mark the daytime, it says. Yeah? The moon is to fill up the nighttime, and also we use the moon to observe our festivals. On the umpteenth day of the first moon, we take a new moon also from its 0 point where you can't see it. You don't take a new moon from a sliver, otherwise you're a day or two late. We know all that too. But let's go on to page 12. The next day, what day are we up to now? We're up to the 5th day now, guys. The next day, Yahusha said, fish and birds, and the seas teemed with shoals of amazing fish and living creatures, and all species of beautiful birds flew above the surface of the earth. This brought Yahusha much joy, and he spoke blessings over them, telling them to increase more and more and fill the earth, the waters and the earth. And there was evening and morning the 5th day. So I like how it says this brought Yahusha much joy. It says that a lot. Yahusha thought this was good. I mean, today the word good means nothing. How you going? Good. Is it good? Yeah, good. It's not a very good word these days. Not very descriptive. But back then, in the truest Hebrew form of the word good, Yahusha was ecstatic with what he'd done. He was so happy. It gave him so much joy to see his new creation. And you only have to see these weird species of birds and fish and the amazing colours that Yahusha brought forth. And you can see why he was just like a kid making stuff out of clay and Play-Doh. Like he was just having a ball, creating all these weird and wonderful, species of birds and fish. So it brought him much joy, and he spoke blessings over them. He said, go for it, reproduce and fill the earth. The next day, Yahusha said, beasts and creatures and countless animals of every sort, creeping creatures, critters, beasts, began roaming according to their kind and making a home on the earth. Yahusha was very pleased with his grand designs, and he proceeded with his greatest masterpiece, forming a human from the dust of the earth. So we've gone from an unshaped, useless blob that had no shape, unshaped gloom and doom blob, to Yahusha giving it form, bringing his presence into the equation, which immediately brings order, discipline into the situation. He goes, all right, no more of this chaos, no more of this, not chaos as in the theory, but no more of this unshapedness. Let's get some order and some discipline into this. So it says, all right, your water, there, we want a gap here, sky, canopy, there, all right. We've got water, too much water, guys, come on, here we go. Let's bring some earth, some ground covering there, so we have the dry land, and we've got the oceans, and then we've got the gap, which is the sky, and then we have the water canopy above. Then we need fish, we need birds, we need livestock, creeping critters, and we need beasts and behemoth and all these other things that talks about. So Then he set it all up. He set up the planet, set up his covenant home, if you will. It's all in pristine order. Everything's friendly too. We'll go into that in a minute. It's not violent. There's no violence. Everything works in harmony, and that sounds very New Age and Mother Earthy, doesn't it? But that's how it was. Everything was connected. The earth with the trees, with the animals, with mankind. Everything was connected and worked in a harmonious order. So let's keep going. He proceeded to do his greatest masterpiece, forming a human from the dust of the earth. From the dust of the earth. And I've made a note here. The first man had the purest, darkest, pigmented skin ever. Just like the rich black soil he was created from. So you can forget about all the movements from the beginning of time that have looked down on black people, looked down on somebody because of the color of their skin, because the very truth of the matter is, the very first man, the human skin, the human body in its purest form, straight out of the dirt, was black. Black as black could be. The blackest human being you could possibly get was the most perfect design, made from the black, rich soil, you know. So over time, as interbreeding occurred, the human pigment has been watered down and got lighter and lighter and lighter, to the point where there's albinos with blonde hair and pink eyes, and you can't go out, almost like vampires, you can't go out in the sun, otherwise you'll burn. So the white man is not the El Supremo. The white man is not the ultimate creation. You know, the black man was created perfect, you know, so his skin and his body could withstand all the elements. So that just goes to show how Shaitan, the enemy, the dragon, over the thousands of years, has been going the opposite to what Yahusha set out to do. He's been trying to destroy and enslave and pester and torment those of darker skin, you know. And it's actually quite the opposite. See how right is wrong and right is wrong and wrong is right, and everything's upside down and balls up according to Shaitan? He's always doing the opposite to what Yahusha did. So anyway, the first man had the purest, darkest, pigmented skin ever, just like the rich black soil he was created from. Yahusha created this human in his own image. It was both male and female like him. Now, I'm not saying he was a hermaphrodite. I'm not saying he had male and female genitalia. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying this human being within himself was created like Yahusha, both male and female, all the attributes, personality traits, emotions, everything was, the essence was male and female. So like Yahusha is. Then he said, wake up, breathing into its nostrils an immortal, everlasting life, and a shared essence of character and conscience with his own, making the human unique from every other creature, able to discern and rule over all creation. That's, when you look at the Hebrew, that's what his essence, his spirit, his ruach, his nature, his character, that's what Yahusha did when he breathed into the man. He gave the man power to be able to rule. I mean, he put his breath of life in all the creatures. That's how they can move. That's why they're alive. No matter how much mankind today tries to clone animals and ultimately trying to clone human beings, they're still baffled on the source of life. How can we put the spark, you know, how can we bring it to life? Dr. Frankenstein, how can we bring this empty shell to life? They still can't work out how to create life, because that's Yahusha. He is the life. He is the living word. His word is life. He is life. When he comes into the situation, life comes with him, because he is the life. So he breathed into this empty shell, this perfected human being, which was lifeless at this point. He breathed into its nostrils life. He said, wake up, you know, putting a shared essence, his character, his conscience, his spirit into him. And this, of course, made the human unique so that he could discern. He could decide right and wrong and rule. He gave the human being a choice whether to obey or not. He didn't create him a robot. So able to discern and rule over all creation. So Adam, mankind, Adam means male and female at this point. Adam, mankind, became a living being, and Yahusha planted a magnificent garden for him, lavish with gorgeous trees and plant life to look at, and also for food, with the tree of life and the tree of understanding in the center. The tree of life and the tree of understanding in the center. There were two trees. These trees could be just understood to be physical trees, like you and I would look at a tree today. They could also, the understanding can also go a lot deeper than that. An interesting note here, in the beginning, right here, in the beginning the whole earth was vegetarian, for there was no death in any creature that had Yahusha's breath of life in it. There was no death. Every single creature on the earth was vegetarian. There was no death, no bloodshed. Yahusha despises bloodshed, and he didn't have any of that. Everything worked in harmonious order. There was also no gardener and no rain on the earth, for Yahusha sent a mighty river flowing out of this garden in Eden. Eden means bliss. To water the garden, and a fine mist rose from the earth every night across the entire surface of the ground, to keep everything alive and lush in this voluptuous greenhouse paradise. Every night, while Adam slept, this mist rose up. He didn't even have to wash or take a bath or shower, didn't have to wash himself. A mist rose up on the earth. And remember, it wasn't cold. We're living, remember the canopy? It kept all the temperatures a real nice, not too hot, not too cold, not too humid, not too dry. Everything was a perfect paradise, created that way on purpose. So this mighty river flowed out from the land of Eden and not only watered the garden, but divided into 4 smaller branches. The first is the Pishon, which flowed around the entire land of Keilah, where pure gold, aromatic resin, and onyx stones are found. Page 13. The second is called the Gihon and flowed around the entire land of Cush. The third is called 𝗪𝗪𝗪, which today we understand to be the Tigris River, and flowed east of the land of Asher. And the fourth is called the Pharat, which is the Euphrates River, which helps when you look on a map. You can see where the Garden of Eden pretty much was. So Adam was placed in this garden to look after and guard it. He had to guard it and look after it. And he shared a special unity with the ground that he was created from, and also with every other creature. Giant ones too, such as dinosaurs. Here's your dinosaurs, guys. This is where dinosaurs came from. But they weren't dangerous. They're all herbivores. And Yahusha brought forth every living creature upon the earth before Adam to see what he would name them. So he included Adam in this process. He wanted to know what Adam would call them. And whatever he decided was what they were called. That was Adam's job. What a cool job. But despite all this excitement and activity, there was no one the same as Adam, no equal or counterpart. So when Yahusha looked at Adam and saw that he was alone, he said, "My boy needs a missus, an equal, someone just like him to keep him company and work alongside him." So Yahusha put Adam into a deep sleep, almost like a death, it says, if you look in the Hebrew. This deep sleep was almost like a death, almost like a coma. And while Adam slept, he cut him open, taking out one of his ribs and molding it into a beautiful woman. He then woke Adam up and presented her to him. And Adam's eyes jumped out of his head and he gasped, "At last, someone like me. Wow, it even looks just like me." Because remember, he had all these creatures coming before him to name them. And this one looked like him. Wow, it even looks just like me. So because it has been taken from my bones and my flesh, I will call her Asher, which is woman, for she was taken out of me. She was a wombed man, and Asher, for she was taken out of me, and Ash, a man. This is why a man must leave his father and mother to embrace and cherish his woman as they come together as one flesh. And I've added there, only a man and woman may be joined together. I know that's not very popular to be said today, but we're going back to what Yahusha says, and this is Yahusha's mind, and this is how Yahusha feels about it. This is something we don't always understand either, whether we've been married or not. In the beginning, the man and woman were the same. They had the same name. They were both called Adam. They were one being. They were two bodies, but they were joined. They behaved and acted as one being because she was taken from him and he was given the shared essence with Yahusha. So they were all working in one mind. They were in unity, you know. The three of them, Yahusha, the man and the woman, were all moving together, working together. And both Adam and his wife were naked and felt no shame about it. They didn't know what nakedness was. They had no idea what guilt, confusion, or disappointment was either. Imagine that. We can't imagine what having a man and a woman just together is one. That's the whole purpose of marriage. We're supposed to grow into that. Sadly, most people don't, but that was the purpose. That's the ultimate. That's what Adam and Ḥawā were in the beginning. That's why he uses the concept of marriage, the marriage home and the marriage relationship to show us what he wants with us as well. So they had no shame about their nakedness, didn't know what it was. They didn't even know what guilt or confusion or disappointment was, for they both had an interdimensional experience. Interdimensional existence. What does that mean? They were able to see into the higher realm where Yahusha was. Most translations say they could see, they had open heavens. This translation doesn't use the word heaven because heaven's become a very pagan term. There's no such thing as heaven or hell. So we don't want to encourage people to use those words. They're a different dimension because Yahusha's right here. It's not up there, heaven and hell. No, none of that. Yahusha's right here, but in a different dimension. And the more TV shows you watch these days, that the sci-fi community understand that. The fan geeks understand that. Just watch Flash. Flash is always jumping in and out of different dimensions. Why can't Yahusha? So the good thing about this is Adam and Ḥawā could see. It doesn't necessarily say they could travel into different dimensions, but they could communicate with the messengers. They could see into the other dimension. What about that? They could see into Yahusha's dimension. Maybe they could see his throne room. I imagine they could. Amazing just to think about these things, isn't it? So they didn't know what guilt or shame or anything of that was because they had an interdimensional existence. They were able to see into the higher realm where Yahusha was, and they were fully clothed in the brightness of his essence and presence, and they were completely content in all things. We don't even know what that means. Completely content in all things. They wanted for nothing. They didn't want anything. They had no desires. You know? Because they had not been awoken to that, and they hadn't been introduced to the enemy yet. So they were just completely like a newborn, innocent in a sense. Newborns aren't even innocent these days because it says the seeds of sin are planted in us from the moment we're conceived. But do you understand what I'm trying to say here? They were completely content. They were perfect beings. Both Adam and Ḥawā were jet black, stark naked, and were just having this interdimensional experience. It's like the physical and the spiritual were joined. You know, like I was saying with Yahusha's voice. We get little snippets of it here and there with certain songs or music. We can see that a physical thing can lift us in our spirits, like music. But they were living this complete interdimensional experience, you know, and obviously took it for granted in a sense because they thought they could, after a while, they thought they could toy with it and do what they wanted. So Yahusha spoke words of blessing over the man and his wife, both called Adam in the beginning, for they were one, instructing them about right and wrong, clean and unclean, telling them to fill the earth and rule over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and all the animals, livestock and creatures, and to guard the Garden of Eden, to tend to it and work it, and eat of its fruit, and that every green plant was for, what's it going to say? For their food. However, Yahusha did put a test before them. Don't eat from the tree of the understanding of good and evil, for if you do, you will certainly, definitely die that same day. Don't eat from the tree of the understanding of good and evil, for if you do, you will die that day. That's what Yahusha said to him. He put a test there. He's always testing to see if we will pass, to see if we will choose him, to see if we will love him over what our eyes see, what our heart feels, what our desires, all this stuff. I've added this. Was this a test about fruit or clean behaviour? And Yahusha was overjoyed at how wonderful his new creation was. And there was evening, then morning, the sixth day. So Yahusha created everything in such a grand, spectacular way in this hedged marriage home of protection, surrounded by the promises of his loving instructions. And on the seventh day he relaxed, took a deep breath and said, Shalom, it's finished. And he rested, Shabbat. It's finished. Shalom means it's finished, and Shabbat means rest. So I've added it all there. He took a deep breath and said, Shalom. He rested, ceasing from all his work, and Yahusha spoke special words of blessing over the seventh day and set it apart from every other day, because it is the day that he finished his creation and, by exemplary example, rested in all his majesty after orchestrating such brilliance, splendor, and artistry. This is one of those human attributes put onto Yahusha. Why did he need to rest? He's a spirit. He doesn't get tired. But it's one of these things I was saying like in the beginning, putting human attributes onto Yahusha in the writing, so we understand not only what we are to do, but what he did as well. It says he did it, and he did it. He rested. He'd finished. He was completely content with his creation. And he hasn't been able to say that ever since. Scripture says many times how he regretted this and regretted that. But Yahusha was overjoyed how wonderful his new creation was. And so far, mankind had passed the test. They hadn't done anything they weren't told not to do. So we're going to leave it there, brothers and sisters. I hope you're finding this helpful. It's going to go all sideways in our next video, because we're going to start talking about the dragon. Don't read on, all right? Wait for me, okay? So I'll see you next time, brothers and sisters. Stay strong, and I'll record another one shortly. Bye-bye.